Look, I need you to put down whatever you're doing for the next 10 minutes. Because what I'm about to tell you, it's going to change how you think about your rights as an American citizen. June 27, 2025, a regular Friday morning in Washington, D.C., the Supreme Court drops a decision in a case called Trump versus Cassa. Most folks scrolling their phones probably thought, oh, another Trump thing, and kept on moving. But here's the thing nobody's talking about. The lawyers who read that decision, they froze. Constitutional scholars examining every single word, they knew instantly something massive had just happened. And I'm not being dramatic here. This wasn't just some legal technicality. This wasn't courtroom drama for the lawyers to argue about. This was the Supreme Court fundamentally rewriting the rules about how you, me, and every single American can defend ourselves against the federal government. 6 justices to 3. That's the vote. And with those 6 votes, they basically said, from now on, if the government does something unconstitutional to you, you better have a lawyer on speed dial because nobody else is going to protect you. Stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to understand why legal experts are calling this one of the most dangerous Supreme Court decisions in modern American history. All right, let me break this down in plain English, because the legal jargon is exactly how they keep regular people confused. So there's this thing called a nationwide injunction. Sounds fancy, right? But it's actually pretty simple. It's when a federal judge says, hey, this government policy is unconstitutional, and I'm blocking it for everybody in America, not just the person who sued. Everybody. Think about it like this. Let's say the government tomorrow announces they're going to start censoring certain types of speech online. Clearly unconstitutional, right? Under the old system, if one civil rights group filed a lawsuit and won, that judge could stop the policy cold, dead in its tracks, for every single American. That's how it worked for decades. One lawsuit could protect 300 million people. But now, after Trump v. Cassa, that same judge can only protect the people who actually filed the lawsuit. The civil rights group that sued, they're protected. Their members, protected. But you, your neighbor, your cousin in another state who didn't even know about the lawsuit, still getting censored, still having their rights violated, until they somehow file their own separate case and win. You starting to see the problem here? Now, here's where it gets really scary. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, one of the 3 who voted against this decision, she didn't hold back. And I mean, she went off. She called this ruling, and I quote, an existential threat to the rule of law. Let that sink in for a second. A sitting Supreme Court justice used the words existential threat. That's not something you throw around lightly. Jackson wrote that this decision creates what she called zones of lawlessness, places where the executive branch, the president, can basically do whatever they want to whoever they want, unless and until each individual person affected goes out and files their own lawsuit. She said the Constitution is now flipped on its head. Your rights aren't automatic anymore. They're not guaranteed just because you're an American. Now your rights only exist if you can afford to fight them in court. And who gets hurt the most by this? Jackson spelled it out crystal clear. The poor, the uneducated, the unpopular. People who don't have lawyers. People who don't know how to navigate the federal court system. People who don't even know their rights are being violated. That's who pays the price for this decision. Let me tell you how we even got to this point. Because the case that triggered all this, it's about something that'll make your blood boil. January 20th, 2025, Trump's first day back in office. He signs Executive Order 14160. Sounds boring, right? But here's what it actually did. Trump tried to redefine who gets to be an American citizen. The 14th Amendment is crystal clear. It says if you're born on American soil, you're an American citizen. Period. This has been the law since 1868. The Supreme Court confirmed it in 1898. For over 125 years, this is how America has worked. But Trump's executive order said, nope. If your parents were undocumented, if they were on a temporary visa, if they were asylum seekers, your American-born baby, not a citizen anymore. Think about that. Babies born in American hospitals on American soil with American birth certificates. Trump said they're not really Americans. 22 states sued immediately. Civil rights groups filed emergency petitions. 3 different federal judges looked at this order and said the same thing. This is blatantly unconstitutional. And they issued nationwide injunctions to stop it. But the Trump administration? They didn't appeal on the constitutional question. They knew they'd lose that argument. Instead, they said the judges went too far by protecting all of us. That's how this case ended up at the Supreme Court. Not about birthright citizenship, about whether judges can protect all of us or just some of us. Okay, so let me explain what the court actually said, because Justice Amy Coney Barrett wrote the majority opinion, and her reasoning is something else. Barrett went back to 1789, the Judiciary Act, the original law that gave federal courts the power to issue injunctions. She said, look, back in the 1700s, English courts didn't issue these broad, universal orders. They only protected the specific people in the courtroom. So, according to Barrett, that's how it should still work today. Judges can give you complete relief if you sue, but only you, not everyone in the same situation, just you. She said allowing nationwide injunctions lets people skip the requirements of class action lawsuits, where you have to prove the case affects a whole class of people and go through this whole formal process. But here's what the dissenters pointed out. Barrett basically invented a historical narrative that didn't match reality. Justice Sotomayor found examples from English courts and early American courts where judges absolutely did issue broad relief to stop ongoing violations. The majority wasn't following history, they were rewriting it. Let me hit you with some numbers that tell the whole story. During the entire 20th century, federal courts issued only 27 nationwide injunctions. The whole century, 27. During Trump's first term alone, 64. Biden's administration, 28. And get this, in just the first 100 days of Trump's second term, there were already 25 nationwide injunctions blocking his policies. The Trump administration called this judge shopping. They said liberal groups were filing cases in friendly courts to get sympathetic judges. And look, there's some truth to that. Both sides play that game. But here's what those injunctions actually did. They stopped unconstitutional policies from hurting millions of people who couldn't file their own lawsuits. They protected immigrants, workers, the environment, voting rights. Now, that protection is gone. And the people who benefited most from it, they're the ones who'll suffer most without it. Let me make this real for you, because this isn't abstract legal theory. This affects actual people's lives. Healthcare. Say a new federal rule restricts certain medical treatments based on religious grounds. Under the old system, one lawsuit wins, everyone's protected. Now, only the people who sued get to keep their health care. Everyone else? They lose access until they file their own case. That could take years. Your job. Overtime rules get stripped away by the feds. Your union files a lawsuit and wins. Great! Union members keep their overtime pay. But what about the 60% of American workers who aren't in unions? They just lost money out of their paychecks until someone sues on their behalf. The environment. Federal agency weakens pollution standards. Environmental groups win a case protecting the communities they represent. But that factory in your neighborhood, still pumping out toxins because nobody filed a lawsuit for your zip code. And civil rights? This is the scariest part. Constitutional rights are supposed to be universal. They're not supposed to depend on whether you can afford a lawyer or whether you happened to live in a state where the Attorney General decided to sue. But that's exactly what this decision does. Your constitutional protections now depend on your zip code and your bank account. Here's something that should terrify every American, regardless of your politics. Your constitutional rights now depend on a geographic lottery. Think about it. If you live in California and your Attorney General decides to sue the federal government over some unconstitutional policy, you might be protected. The lawsuit wins, California residents are covered. But what if you live in Texas and your Attorney General doesn't want to sue because they agree with the policy? Tough luck. Same constitution, same rights on paper, but you don't get protection. This creates a patchwork nightmare. Blue state residents might be protected from Republican overreach, red state residents left exposed. Then flip it around when a Democrat's in the White House. And this isn't how the Constitution is supposed to work. The whole point of constitutional rights is that they're universal. They apply everywhere, to everyone, regardless of politics. But after Trump v. Cassa, we've got a two-tiered system. Your rights depend on who your governor is, who your attorney general is, whether your state has the resources to file federal lawsuits. The Constitution is supposed to protect all Americans equally, not just the ones lucky enough to live in the right state. So what happens now? The legal landscape is about to get messy, real messy. First, expect an explosion of class action lawsuits. That's the workaround the Supreme Court left open. But class actions are complicated, expensive, and take forever to certify. We're talking months or years before people get protection. Within hours of the Cassa decision, lawyers were already filing class actions. Judge Joseph Leland certified a nationwide class on July 10th, covering the birthright citizenship issue. So there are ways around this, but they're harder, they're slower, and in the meantime, people are getting hurt. Second, state attorneys general just became insanely powerful. If 20-plus AGs coordinate and file lawsuits together, they can protect maybe 150 million Americans. But that requires political will. It requires resources. It requires states that don't even agree on anything else to work together. Congress could act. They could pass a law specifically authorizing nationwide injunctions. But you know Congress. Don't hold your breath. And here's the wild card. Trump has asked the Supreme Court to rule on birthright citizenship itself, not just the injunction question, the actual constitutional question of whether the 14th Amendment means what we've said it means for 125 years. That case could come down any day now. Let me leave you with this. Constitutional law isn't some abstract thing that only matters to lawyers and judges. It's the framework that determines whether your rights are protected or violated, whether you have any recourse when the government oversteps, whether justice is something you can access or something that depends on your wealth and your connections. The Trump v. Cassa decision is a seismic shift in how America works, and I need you to understand what the dissenters warned us about. Justice Jackson said this creates zones of lawlessness where the president can do whatever they want to whoever they want. And the only way out is if you personally have the resources to fight back in federal court. Justice Sotomayor said no right is safe in this new regime. Today, it's birthright citizenship. Tomorrow, it could be gun rights, religious freedom, free speech, whatever the government decides to target. And here's the thing that keeps me up at night. Most Americans don't even know this happened. They scrolled past the headline. They didn't understand what it meant. But it means everything. It means the Constitution only protects you if you can afford to enforce it yourself. So what do? We stay informed. We pay attention. We understand how power actually works in this country, because knowledge is the first step. And we're going to need every tool we've got to protect what's left of our constitutional rights. The Supreme Court has spoken. Now the question is, how does America respond?